Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Thursday, February 7th, 2019. The trade deadline has come and gone. A lot of big trades happened yesterday night and this morning. I have no idea where to start. So we'll just go from the most recent deal to the deal that happened the closest to when I recorded the podcast. So the Orlando Magic acquire Markelle Fultz from the Philadelphia 76ers. Going back the other way is Jonathan Simmons, a first-round pick and a second-round pick. Not a bad haul for Philly. They pretty much got a lot back for him, in which they gave up a lot to get Tobias Harris in the first place. Fultz still has value. That's what today's trade proved. And I like it for both ends. Philly gets a lot back. And Orlando is a team that needs to take a chance on something or someone. They haven't been good since Dwight Howard left. And if Fultz turns out to be the guy that Philadelphia thought he was, that's a huge win for them. If he turns out to be a big bust and Philly gets another lottery pick out of it, then Philadelphia wins the deal. And then Simmons is somebody who I thought Orlando overpaid after being a good role player on the Spurs. And I thought really it was a little bit of a Spurs product, but we'll see after he's out of Orlando where he really is and how he fits with Philly. Another trade that happened was that the Kings traded Scalabicier to the Portland Trailblazers for Caleb Swanigan, two failed first-round picks switching homes. I'm interested to see how this plays out. I like Labissiere. He was a disappointment in college, and he's been a disappointment in the pros. Swanigan was a stud in college, but a disappointment in the pros. So it should be very, very interesting to see how that turns out, although it was a smaller deal. An intriguing deal is that the Clippers traded Mike Muscala to the Lakers for Michael Beasley and Ivica Zubac. I can't believe the Lakers gave up on Zubac for a role player. Like, Magic Johnson must be out of his mind to think that Muscala is this much better. I'll give you this. Muscala's a stretch five who could shoot threes, and he could shoot it darn good, and this Lakers team needed shooting, and he'll provide it off the bench. Zubac could be a future starting center in the league. I expect him to start for the Clippers for the rest of the season, and yet they have another asset to put in a potential offer for Anthony Davis down the road, who obviously was not traded today to anywhere. And I think the field is more open now that they didn't trade him to the Lakers. The Lakers are still in play, but they're not, to me, the favorites. I think the Celtics and the Knicks are favorites with the Lakers, and I think the Clippers are right there. Milwaukee is a team that was mentioned, but the only reason why Milwaukee's on the list is because of Giannis Antetokounmpo. And that front court with Davis and Giannis, your front court would be just sensational. But yeah, that Clippers-Lakers trade was bizarre, and I can't believe that actually happened. And the biggest trade of the day was the Memphis Grizzlies trading Marc Gasol to the Toronto Raptors for Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, CJ Miles, and a 2024 second-round pick. That's a steal for Toronto. They stole Marc Gasol. I thought Gasol was going to fetch back a first, maybe a protected first in a couple seconds, and maybe some young players from Toronto, but holy cow. Good for the Raptors. And very bad for John Hollinger and that front office in Memphis. The Grizzlies also traded Garrett Temple and Michael Green to the Clippers for Avery Bradley. You know, I like to go the Grizzlies will buy out Bradley, because I don't see how Bradley fits on that team, and Memphis is trying to lose games rather than win games to keep their lottery pick. Green and Temple are just two assets for the Clippers. I think Temple has a chance to be bought out, and then a team that didn't make a move at the deadline that could use a shooter off the bench as a winger, that would be where Temple would come into play for somebody else. And Jermichael Green's a nice player, young guy, power forward. He could be another asset for the Clippers down the road. And the New York Knicks bought out Enes Kanter, and they also bought out Wesley Matthews. That comes to nobody's surprise. And the first deal of today ended up being somewhat of a surprise. Nikola Mirotic was traded from the New Orleans Pelicans to Milwaukee for Stanley Johnson and a couple second-round picks, and I believe Jason Smith was in the deal too. So it ends up being a three-way deal. Detroit and Milwaukee each sent 2 second-round picks to New Orleans. Stanley Johnson goes to New Orleans, as well as Jason Smith. And also, obviously, Mirotic to Milwaukee. And then Thon Maker goes from Milwaukee to Detroit. I didn't get this one, to be honest. Everybody loves it. Mirotic is a great bench player. He can shoot. He's just not a good defensive player. And I think there could be fit issues here with Mirotic and Giannis, who both play the same position, power forward, unless you make Giannis your center. And I'm sorry, who is guarding Joel Embiid and Marc Gasol in a playoff series? And if you face Indiana in round 1, Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis. And then if you have to play Boston, who's guarding Al Horford? Oh my God. Like, you have to put Giannis on those guys, I guess, because Giannis is probably the best defender on the team, unless you would cross-switch and put Chris Middleton, who is a wing player, on a big guy. But I would have Giannis guard the opposing team center and hide Mirotic on defense because he stinks defensively. So that's just bizarre. One of the more bizarre trades I could think from a fit standpoint, but maybe they bring Mirotic off the bench and he'll give them 6 minutes a half with Milwaukee's second unit, which I think he'd be better suited for rather than playing in crunch time. But if they were to do crunch time, they'd have to go Giannis at the 5, Mirotic at the 4, and then you have Middleton at the 3, Brogdon as your 2, and then at point guard, Eric Bledsoe. That's who I think Milwaukee would go with in crunch time. And then there's also Brook Lopez, who's had a pretty good year this year for Milwaukee, and he's shooting it from 3 pretty well, although Mirotic is a better three-point shooter than Lopez. But Lopez would then, in theory, lose some playing time too if you want to go small. But if you want to go big, then you have to sit Mirotic or play Giannis at the 3 and sit either Bledsoe or Brogdon. So there's going to be some fit issues with that trade. And another trade was that Houston traded James Ennis to Philly. A couple second-round picks went back to Houston. That, to me, was a bit of a surprise. I don't think Houston, I would have thought of James Ennis going to Philly. If anything, that Houston would go after like a bigger name player, and Ennis would be a part of a package going to a rebuilding team. Like if, let's just say, for example, let's say if Houston wanted to get Aaron Gordon to be their stretch 4, I would have put James Ennis in that package along with Eric Gordon and a couple future first-round picks for Aaron Gordon. Not that the Magic would trade Gordon, but let's just say he was available. That's the kind of trade I would use James Ennis in, not to a contender in Philadelphia. So that one caught me by surprise. But not a bad pickup for Philly per se. But Houston obviously wanted to clear roster space for a buyout guy, which I don't blame them for. Another trade that happened last night, the Washington Wizards traded Markieff Morris to the Pelicans. I think that Morris will be bought out by New Orleans, and then Morris would have to pick a contender to go to. And there's a lot of good contenders that could use a player like Morris, who is a combo forward. Like Oklahoma City would be perfect. Maybe the Lakers to come off the bench, although they already traded for Muscala, and then they traded for Reggie Bullock last night. I almost said Garrett Temple, but that was the Clippers that traded for Garrett Temple. But we'll get to that Lakers-Pistons trade in a little bit. But going back to Washington was Wesley Johnson. Maybe he's bought out and somebody signs him off the waiver wire as well. And then also yesterday, there was another trade. The Dallas Mavericks traded Harrison Barnes to the Sacramento Kings for Zach Randolph's expiring contract and Justin Jackson. Great trade for Sacramento. They get somebody who has a ring, and he has played in a bunch of big games before with the Warriors. Nice veteran pickup for Sacramento. They needed a combo forward. I believe that's the only trade prediction I got right on the podcast, except I had the last asset wrong. I thought it'd be Zach Randolph in the future first rounder. Instead, it ended up being a former first round pick in Justin Jackson, who really hasn't panned out much for Sacramento. And the irony of this trade was that this trade happened while the Mavericks were playing, so Harrison Barnes had to be pulled from the game, and they told him he was traded. So a little bit of a disappointment, I guess, for Barnes. But I do think this is a good opportunity for Barnes. He's a leader, a veteran that could help that young Kings team potentially be a playoff team if the Clippers fall out or if the Lakers don't come together. There's a lot of possibilities I think that Sacramento can get in. Maybe San Antonio falls out. I don't think Utah will fall out because Utah is a good team. I think there's a chance San Antonio falls out if a couple injuries happen. And obviously the Lakers, if that doesn't pan out and LeBron's not healthy, they're probably or could be in the lottery. So there's a chance that Sacramento is a surprise playoff team in the Western Conference this year. Now it'd just be phenomenal, and that would put Dave Yeager on my Coach of the Year ballot for sure with that. Also, among trade news, the Rockets acquired Iman Shumpert from Sacramento as the Cavs send Alec Burks and a second-round pick to the Kings, and Brandon Knight and a lottery-protected first-round pick go to Cleveland. I think it's bizarre that Houston gave up a protected first for Shumpert. That, to me, is absurd. Shumpert's not worth that. I remember, my goodness, 6 years ago, he showed a lot of promise with the Knicks, and the Knicks thought he was their version of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And he didn't turn out to be that. He was nowhere close to Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. I don't get why Houston gave up a protected first-round pick for him. I mean, maybe they just did that to dump Brandon Knight's contract. I know that is obviously another reason why they probably did it. But Shumpert give the Rockets good minutes off the bench. Burke is a nice veteran that will help Sacramento. And then Cleveland gets a huge win by getting a lottery-protected first-round pick, which will probably end up being in the 20s. But still, it's a good haul for a guy that they pretty much just got from Utah not that long ago. And then another move that happened last night, the Washington Wizards traded Otto Porter to the Chicago Bulls for Bobby Portis and Jabari Parker. To me, this is a weird one too. I'm surprised that the Bulls took on some salary, but maybe they want like a semi-veteran type of player to come in there and help their young team grow. This trade actually happened before the Harrison Barnes deal, but it's kind of reminiscent of that, except the Bulls are so bad. They're like just as bad as the Knicks and the Suns. Meanwhile, the Kings are a team, but let's face it, heading in the right direction right now. They're in the playoff picture in the Western Conference. They have a franchise point guard in De'Aaron Fox, a franchise big man in Marvin Bagley. They have Willie Cauley-Stein, who I thought had a chance to be flipped at the deadline. I think I predicted that he'd be traded to, I think I said the Miami Heat because he was an expiring contract. But the Kings have some nice young pieces, and that addition of Barnes is really going to help them. I think Porter is a solid player, but not worth that contract. This is like a Tim Hardaway situation a little bit with the Knicks too. A good player that's not worth the money. But I get why Dallas absorbed him. They absorbed him to get Kristaps Porzingis, not to help their young core like what Chicago did with Porter. But I don't mind the deal for Chicago. And Porter, if he has a good couple games with the Bulls, could be flipped in the summer for more. And they didn't give up much for Porter, and this is why I hate this deal for Washington. They gave up a player that was a even the second overall pick, who was a bust, in Jabari Parker, and Bobby Portis, who's at best a role player. Like, that is a bad trade for Washington. I really don't mind it for the Bulls. Everybody thinks it's the other way around. But no, I think Porter could be flippable again if he provides some good play for the Bulls down the stretch this year. And Parker and Portis are two guys on expiring contracts. Like, what are the Wizards doing? And if anything, they probably should have traded Trevor Ariza and they could have gotten some value for him. And then another trade that happened yesterday is that Miami trades Wayne Ellington and Tyler Johnson to Phoenix for the onerous Ryan Anderson contract. I didn't get it for Miami. Phoenix, I get it because they're looking for point guards. Tyler Johnson is a gritty player. He'll help them. Maybe he's traded again eventually. I'm talking about Johnson. And then they're buying out Wayne Ellington, and Wayne Ellington is going to be highly coveted on the buyout market for one of these contenders that are looking for bench help. And then also, I mentioned this yesterday, the Pistons traded Stanley Johnson for Thon Maker, but that ended up being a 3-team deal involving the Pelicans, in which the Pelicans sent Nikola Mirotic to Milwaukee, and Stanley Johnson didn't go to Milwaukee. He went to New Orleans, and then Maker goes from Milwaukee to Detroit. And speaking of the NBA, I'm going to go over last night's results in the NBA. Yes, I'm going to start the NBA today because today's the trade deadline, and in less than an hour from now, they'll announce the All-Star teams. The Nets defeat the Nuggets 135-130. Great win for Brooklyn. Come from behind style. 29-27 on the year. Denver's 37-17. Nikola Jokic 25 points. They go with 10 assists and 14 rebounds in a defeat. He was the best player on the court, and they still lost, but that was a pretty bad loss for Denver. They had a big lead and probably should have won. Mason Plumlee, the former Net, had 24 points and 6 boards. Jamal Murray, 19 points, 11 assists. Malik Beasley had 17. Off the bench, Trey Lyles had 15, and Monte Morris had 18. Meanwhile, for Brooklyn, D'Angelo Russell, 27 points, 11 assists, 6 boards. Trayvon Graham had 16. Jarrett Allen had 15. Joe Harris had 17. And off the bench, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson had 15. Damari Carroll had 18. And Shabazz Napier had 10. The Pelicans defeat the Bulls 125-120. As New Orleans goes to 24-31. Chicago drops to 12-42. Jahlil Okafor continues to play good basketball for the Pelicans. 13 points and 5 boards. Drew Holiday had 18 with 11 assists and 6 boards. Darius Miller had 12, as well as Kenrich Williams. Best player in this game with 37 points and 7 boards off the bench, Julius Randle in his first game back from injury. Cheik Diallo had 18. And meanwhile for Chicago, Lauri Markkanen, 30 points and 10 boards. 5 for 10 from 3. Great game for him. Robin Lopez had 11 in what probably was his final game as a Bull. They're talking about buyout for him. Chris Dunn had 18 with 8 assists. Zach LaVine had 28 points, 8 boards and 7 assists. Bench didn't do much for Chicago. The Bucks defeat the Wizards 148-129. The Bucks go to 40-13. Washington is 22-32. Giannis Antetokounmpo continues to play great. 43 points, 6 boards, 4 assists. Chris Middleton had 16. Brook Lopez had 11. Eric Bledsoe had 22 with 6 boards and 11 assists. Malcolm Brogdon had 18. And off the bench, Ersan Ilyasova had 12. The Mavericks defeat the Hornets 99-93. Dallas goes to 25-28. Charlotte drops to 26-28. Luka Doncic with another triple-double. 19 points, 10 boards, 11 assists. Dorian Finney-Smith had 15 with 10 boards. Harrison Barnes in his last game as a Mav had 10 with 11 points and 7 boards. Max Kleber off the bench. Dwight Howell had 11 and Tim Hardaway Jr. had 12. The Jazz defeat the Suns 116-88. Utah goes to 31-24. Phoenix drops to 11-15. Donovan Mitchell, 21 points in the win. Derek Favors had 14. Joe Ingles had 15 with 11 assists. Rudy Gobert had 16 with 12 boards. Ricky Rubio had 13 with 9 boards and 6 assists. And off the bench, Jay Crowder had 11. And Royce O'Neal had 15. The Rockets defeat the Kings 127-101. A great win for Houston, considering how well Sacramento's been playing in their home building. Houston's 32-22. Sacramento drops to 28-26. James Harden, 36 points and 6 boards. Eric Gordon had 20. Chris Paul had 15 with 11 assists. Kenneth Faried, been a good pickup for them so far, 13 points and 11 boards. Off the bench, Gerald Green had 25, and Austin Rivers had 12. The Warriors killed the Spurs 141-102 on national television. This was just great going by Golden State, except for Kevin Durant facing the media after the game, as I'll get to in a second. Golden State goes to 38-15. San Antonio drops to 34-24. Klay Thompson, 26 points with 6 assists. Stephen Curry had 19 with 7 assists. DeMarcus Cousins, who's fitting very well with the Warriors, had 15. Kevin Durant had 23, 9 assists, and 8 boards. Off the bench, Kevin Looney had 10, and Andre Iguodala had 11. Patty Mills had 16. Davis Bertans had 12. Rudy Gay had 15. And Dante Cunningham off the bench had 11. And Bryn Forbes off the bench had 10. Tonight's slate, 6 games. At 7 o'clock, you have the Clippers at the Pacers, the Timberwolves at the Magic, the Raptors at the Hawks at 7:30. 8 o'clock on TNT, the Lakers at the Celtics. Boston's favored by 9. Lakers are a mess right now. I think there's going to be a lot of distractions with the trades and whatnot. You can make a case that LeBron's going to come out motivated to play against the Celtics because he always plays well in Boston. But at the same time, Boston loves when they face LeBron. They're going to be in his face. I do think the Celtics will win, but they'll get a cover late in the game. I think it's competitive, but it's a double-digit win for Boston. The Grizzlies at the Thunder, and at 10:30 on TNT, the Spurs at the Blazers. Portland's favored by 6. Portland's coming off the bad loss against Miami. Spurs coming off the blowout against Golden State. They did not have LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMar DeRozan in that game. They'll be both playing tonight, so storyline is that Aldridge against the Blazers. I'm going to take the Blazers here to bounce back at home. That was a bad loss against Miami the other day, and I think Damian Lillard and company are going to come out and have a good game, and I think they're going to be motivated to play against LaMarcus Aldridge as well. So give me Portland, the win, and the cover. College basketball. Big slate last night. Temple defeated UConn 81-63. Big win for Temple. They're 17-6. UConn is 13-10. Number 24, Maryland defeats Nebraska 60-45. Maryland 18-6. Nebraska 13-10. Whoa, Nebraska season's falling apart. Clemson defeats Georgia Tech 65-42. Clemson 14-8. Georgia Tech 11-12. Hartford defeats UMBC 70-61. Hartford 12-12. UMBC 14-10. Ole Miss defeats Texas A&M 75-71. Ole Miss, much needed win, 15-7 on the year. Texas A&M's 8-13. Davidson defeats Rhode Island 68-53. Davidson 17-5. Rhode Island 12-10. Lipscomb defeats North Florida 92-55. Lipscomb 19-4. North Florida 9-16. VCU defeats George Washington 60-50. VCU 16-6. George Washington 7-15. Florida Gulf Coast defeats North Alabama 71-64. Gulf Coast 10-15. Alabama North 8-17. Indiana State defeats Evansville 85-62. Indiana State 12-11. Evansville 10-14. Stony Brook defeats Binghamton 85-59. Stony Brook 19-5, and Binghamton is 6-18. Miami defeats Notre Dame 62-47. Miami 10-12. Notre Dame bad loss 12-11. Bucknell defeats Loyola Maryland 84-72. Bucknell 15-8. Loyola Maryland 8-16. Wichita defeats East Carolina 65-49. Wichita's back at 500 at 11-11. East Carolina's 9-13. UMass Lowell defeats New Hampshire 72-62. UMass Lowell 13-11. New Hampshire 3-19. Jacksonville defeats Kennesaw State 82-73. Jacksonville 11-14. Kennesaw 4-20. Vermont defeats Maine 86-63. Vermont 18-5. Maine 5-19. Lafayette defeats Boston University 79-72. Lafayette was a big dog. They win outright. Lafayette goes to 6-16. BU drops to 11-13. Navy defeats American 77-67. Navy 8-14. American 12-10. Richmond defeats George Mason 81-67. Richmond 9-14. George Mason 13-10. Fordham defeats UMass 85-67. Fordham is 10-12. UMass is 8-15. Holy Cross defeats Army 56-42. Holy Cross 13-11. Army 11-13. Sam Houston State defeats McNeese 77-62. Sam Houston is 15-8. McNeese's 7-15. New Orleans defeats Northwestern State 81-73 in overtime. New Orleans is 13-9. Northwestern State is 8-15. St. Bonaventure defeats Duquesne 51-49. St. Bonaventure 9-13. Duquesne 15-8. That was a bad loss for Duquesne. Georgetown defeats Providence 76-67. A big win for Georgetown. They're 15-8. Providence is 13-10. Number 14, Villanova defeats Creighton 66-59 in overtime. Villanova 19-4. Creighton 13-10. UL Monroe defeats Georgia State 82-76. UL Monroe 12-10. Georgia State is 16-7. North Dakota State defeats North Dakota 74-70. North Dakota State 12-12. North Dakota 9-15. Missouri State defeats Southern Illinois 65-59. Missouri State 12-12, and Southern Illinois is 12-12 as well. Georgia Southern defeats Louisiana 103-86. Georgia Southern 14-9. Louisiana 13-10. Bradley defeats Northern Iowa 79-71. Bradley 12-12. Northern Iowa 10-14. Texas defeats Baylor 84-72. A huge win for Shaka Smart. They're 13-10. Baylor is 15-7. Stephen F. Austin defeats Houston Baptist 79-77. Stephen F. Austin 12-9. Houston Baptist is 7-14. Abilene Christian defeats Lamar 75-64. Abilene Christian 19-4. Lamar is 11-12. Southeast Louisiana defeats A&M Corpus Christi 64-58. Southeast Louisiana is 10-13. A&M Corpus Christi is 9-13. Number 19, Wisconsin defeats Minnesota 56-51. A huge win for the Badgers. They're 17-6. Minnesota 16-7. Number 21, LSU defeats Mississippi State 92-88 in overtime. LSU 18-4. Mississippi State 16-6. Alabama defeats Georgia 89-74. Bama 14-8. Georgia 10-12. Air Force defeats Wyoming 81-76. Air Force 10-13. Wyoming 5-17. Colorado defeats UCLA 84-73. Colorado 13-9. UCLA 12-11. TCU defeats Oklahoma State 70-68. TCU 16-6. Oklahoma State 9-13. Oregon defeats Cal 73-62. Oregon is 14-9. Cal's 5-17. Number 6, Nevada defeats Colorado State 98-82. Nevada 22-1. Colorado State 9-14. UC Irvine defeats Cal State Fullerton 60-53. UC Irvine 20-5. Cal State Fullerton 9-13. Santa Barbara defeats Cal State Northridge 70-64. Santa Barbara 15-5. Northridge 10-14. UNLV defeats Boise State 83-72. UNLV 12-10. Boise 10-13. And last but not least, Utah upsets USC 77-70 as Utah improves to 12-10 and USC drops to 13-10. Now tonight's games, there I believe a whopping 63 games on tonight's slate. 2 of them are going on right now. Central Connecticut State's at St. Francis, Pennsylvania, and Fairleigh Dickinson is at Sacred Heart. So 2 NEC games going on right now. 7 o'clock on ESPN2, number 25 Cincinnati at Memphis. Cincinnati's a 4-point favorite. I'm going to take the Bearcats to win and cover. Yes, you can make a case. Trap game, Penny Hardaway, Memphis. This could be a signature spot for Memphis. But I don't trust this Memphis team. They laid down last weekend against South Florida. I just wasn't impressed with them. So give me Cincinnati to win a low-scoring game on the road. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's a double-digit win for the Bearcats. CBS Sports Network, number 12, Houston and UCF. Houston's a favorite by 2. Guess what? Trap game. This is where I'm buying the trap. UCF needs this game badly. If they are going to win this game in order for them to have consideration as an at-large bid. And if they get this win, I may or may not put them in my mock bracket that I'm doing tomorrow. I'm doing a mock bracket tomorrow on the podcast as one of the many activities I have planned. So, give me UCF as a 2-point dog to win outright. You have Green Bay at Cleveland State, William & Mary at Northeastern, Charleston at Delaware, Milwaukee at Youngstown State, Bryan at Robert Morris, Oakland at Wright State. On ESPNU, Radford at Hampton. Radford's favored by 3.5. This is the Big South. I think Radford is going to win and cover. They're the best team in that conference. UNC Asheville at Presbyterian, Alon at Hofstra, Chattanooga at VMI, UNC Wilmington at Drexel, Campbell at High Point, Wagner at St. Francis Brooklyn, On ESPN, you have Penn State at Ohio State. Ohio State's laying 7. Ohio State's been struggling lately. They may be still in play for an at-large, but I think that there's a lot of major schools down this year, so you might see a lot of weird teams in my at-large, or a lot of mediocre teams, like this Buckeyes team, like a team from the Big 12, like a Texas, who has some big wins this year over the likes of North Carolina and Kansas. But Kansas is asterisk because of no Ezike Azubuike. So, Penn State, Ohio State. I think Ohio State needs this win. Penn State's coming off their win over Northwestern. I see this as a letdown spot for the Nittany Lions. So, give me Ohio State here to win by double digits and obviously cover the point spread. Gardner-Webb at Longwood, Detroit Mercy at Northern Kentucky, Mount St. Mary's at LIU, Brooklyn Little Rock at Troy, Sanford at UNC Greensboro, Monmouth at St. Peter's, Wofford at East Tennessee State. There's more than 63 games on the slate. Maybe more like 66, but it seems like it's somewhere in the 60s. Western Illinois at Purdue, Fort Wayne, Furman at Western Carolina. If I didn't mention Wofford, East Tennessee State already, that is a huge game in the Southern Conference. These two teams are combined 38-9. I'm going to pick it just for the hell of it. East Tennessee State's a 1-point favorite. I think the wrong team is favored here, believe it or not. Wofford is unbeaten in the Southern Conference. I think you can get at-larges from this conference if things break right. Give me Wofford here on the road in a close one, maybe by 4 points. 7:30 at Furman at Western Carolina, Charlotte at Middle Tennessee, Winthrop at Charleston Southern, Belmont at East Kentucky, Tennessee State at Morehead State, 8 o'clock Pac-12 Network, Washington State at Arizona State. Arizona State's laying 15, they'll win and cover. Bobby Hurley's team is due for a big performance, and Washington State stinks. Denver at Oral Roberts, East Illinois at Murray State, Marshall at North Texas, Appalachian State at Texas State, FIU at UTSA, Arkansas State at South Alabama, Omaha at South Dakota, Coastal Carolina at Texas Arlington, Old Dominion at UAB, 8:30, SIU Edwardsville at Austin Peay, Idaho State at Northern Arizona, Weber State at Southern Utah, Jacksonville State at Tennessee Martin, 8:45 Tennessee Tech at Southeast Missouri State, 9 o'clock you have San Francisco at number 4 Gonzaga. Gonzaga is usually a lock to win and cover every West Coast Conference game. So give me Gonzaga to win and the cover. Big. I never bet against Gonzaga, like ever. Unless if I had to take a weird hunch or something. Number 20, Iowa at Indiana, 9 o'clock on ESPN. The Hoosiers are giving 2 points. I think the wrong team is favored here. I think that Indiana will have a letdown here at home after their big win at Michigan State. So give me the Hawkeyes to pull off the upset on the road. And plus, Indiana is missing one of its key players today, and Jawan Morgan, I believe. So give me Iowa to win outright as a 2-point underdog. Eastern Washington at Montana State, Texas Rio Grande at Grand Canyon, FAU at UTEP, Idaho at Montana, ESPNU South Florida at SMU. SMU's favored by 5. South Florida, I think, has been the biggest surprise in the American Athletic Conference this year. I do not think they'll make the tournament, but this team was projected to finish 11th, only beneath Tulane. So Brian Gregory deserves a lot of credit, but this feels like a game where SMU is just going to come out and put up a good performance. They've had a disappointing year, the Ponies, but I think they'll just get this one at home tonight. On ESPN2, you have Washington and Arizona. Arizona's favored by 1.5. I think the wrong team is favored here, to be quite frank. I think it should at least be a pick-em. Arizona's lost some weird games lately. Washington needs this game. They're 18-4, and I think they're a good bet to get to the tournament. So give me Washington here to pull out the road upset. CBS Sports Network at 9 o'clock. You have Western Kentucky at Rice. Western's laying 5. They'll win and cover. They're just a better team than Rice. Period. End of story. Portland State at Northern Colorado. 10 o'clock. UC Davis at Cal Poly. Hawaii at Long Beach State. Stanford at Oregon State on the Pac-12 Network. Oregon's favored by 7.5, and I think they'll win and they'll cover. By the way, Oregon State, I think, is a real dark horse to get in that large bid, considering how many major conference teams are down this year. New Mexico State at Cal State Bakersfield. Santa Clara at Pepperdine. Chicago State at Cal Baptist. San Diego at Loyola Marymount. ESPN2, you have BYU at Portland. BYU is laying 12.5. They are better than Portland. Portland's arguably the worst team in the West Coast Conference. I expect BYU to win and cover, although I don't feel super about it. Pacific at St. Mary's on ESPNU. St. Mary's is laying 14.5. I think they'll win. Wouldn't be shocked if Pacific covered, but I think St. Mary's will end up covering. St. Mary's is not the St. Mary's of old, but I do think they'll put on a show tonight against Pacific, and I mean a defensive performance show, not necessarily an offensive performance show. Only 2 games last night in the National Hockey League. The Maple Leafs defeat the Senators 5-4. Much needed win for Toronto. They're 33-17-3. Ottawa's 19-29-5. Number 1 star of the game with the goal and assist is Zach Hyman. Number 2 star of the game with the goal and assist, John Tavares. Number 3 star of the game with 2 goals for the Senators, Magnus Pajärvi. The Rangers defeat the Bruins 4-3 in a shootout. This was a great game, a great overtime. Bruins were up 3-1 going into the third period. Rangers come back and tie it. Forced overtime. Overtime was one of the better overtimes you'll ever see. With the goalies, 2 backup goalies, by the way, and Yaroslav Halak and Georgiev making big save after big save, but ultimately the inferior team comes out a winner, and that's the Rangers, who improved to 23-22-8. Bit of a surprise that they're over 500 at this point in the season, as Boston drops to 29-17-8. Number 1 star of the game with 2 assists, Pavel Buchnevich. Number 2 star of the game with a goal, Mika Zibanejad. Number 3 star of the game with 2 assists, Brad Marchand. Big slate tonight in hockey. 7 o'clock, the Hurricanes at the Sabres, the Penguins at the Panthers, the Islanders at the Devils, the Kings at the Flyers, the Avalanche at the Capitals. 7:30, the Jets at the Canadiens, the Ducks at the Senators, the Golden Knights at the Red Wings, the Blues at the Lightning. 8 o'clock, the Stars at the Predators, the Oilers at the Wild. 8:30, the Canucks at the Blackhawks. 9 o'clock, the Sharks at the Flames, and the Blue Jackets at the Coyotes. Before I give out my trade deadline grades for the NBA teams, another trade happened today in Major League Baseball. JT Realmuto finally traded from the Miami Marlins to the Philadelphia Phillies. Going back to Miami, Jorge Alfaro, Sixto Sanchez, international bonus money, and Will Stewart. So, huge deal. Phillies make a big move after making several other big moves. Maybe there's one more to come, whether that's Bryce Harper or Manny Machado, who are both obviously still unsigned. It's amazing that the NBA trade deadline happened and the 2 biggest free agents in perhaps baseball history are still on the market in Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. Maybe Philadelphia does end up doing one or the other, but Realmuto, great pickup for Philly. He's an upgrade over Alfaro. Alfaro was obviously a prospect they got back in the Cole Hamels deal back in 2015. Alfaro really didn't live up to potential. Maybe he will in Miami. And it's funny because there's this perception out there that Miami didn't want to trade in the division, but they did. They traded in division to Philadelphia, and now you have 4 teams that can conceivably win the NL East. With possibly more moves to come with any of those teams, with the activity those teams have been on this offseason. Maybe Bryce Harper does go back to the Nationals. Maybe Harper or Machado go to Philly. Maybe the Mets have another move in them. Maybe Dallas Keuchel goes to Atlanta or to Philadelphia. So you never know, and you can make a case for any of those 4 teams to win the division. The only certain thing in the NL East right now is that the Miami Marlins will indeed finish in last place and will trade out their assets this season, such as Ian Kinsler and Starlin Castro, and who else ever they bring in, maybe Curtis Granderson, because they signed him on a minor league deal recently as well. So, yet a big deal for Philadelphia. Like I said, their addition so far, Realmuto, they added Segura to be, who knows whether it's shortstop or second base, depending on what happens with Machado. Andrew McCutchen in the outfield. And those are 3 good additions to their offense. And maybe they go out and sign a reliever like a Kimbrel or a starter like a Keuchel to be their number 3 behind Aaron Nola and Jake Arrieta. So a big deal in baseball today, in a day which the NBA stole the day. Now I'm going to give out my trade deadline grades for each and every team. I'm going to say the team, then the grade, and I'll say why. The Atlanta Hawks got a C- for me. They did not trade away 2 good assets in Kent Bazemore and Dwayne Dedmon, who I thought were almost certain needs to be dealt. And they should have been in on Markelle Fultz. That would have been a perfect team for him. Him and a good big man that's up and coming like John Collins would have been fun to watch. And Trae Young with Fultz in that back here would have been very interesting. The Boston Celtics get a C. I thought there was a chance that they'd make a big move, but they didn't. And they are rumored to sign Enes Kanter off the buyout market from the Knicks. And Kanter would probably do what Greg Monroe did for them last year and be the backup big guy that comes in and gives off minutes off the bench and could lead the second unit a little bit, even though he's a bad defensive player, as we all know. The Brooklyn Nets get a C+. They didn't upgrade their bench or their power forward position, but you could argue that they really didn't have to do anything because they're ahead of schedule in their rebuild, and they're getting Karis LeVert back tomorrow night, which is huge news for them. I thought he was going to be done for the year after that gruesome injury against the Bucks, but he's back, and he'll give that team a jolt. So I give the Nets only a C+. The Charlotte Hornets got a C-. They didn't find a home for Frank Kaminsky, and they were trying to do that. They were in on Marc Gasol, but struck out. They probably would have gave up more than what Toronto gave up for him. Or at least that's what I have heard. The Chicago Bulls got a B. They didn't give up on any young or important players like Lauri Markkanen or Chris Dunn or even Zach LaVine to throw in that sentence. But if somebody overpaid for LaVine, then that's okay. But if they gave up LaVine for very little, I would have given the Bulls a low grade. Porter, if he plays well, I mentioned this before, could get flipped again in the summer. And he's somebody that is not as bad as a player as people make him out to be. He just has a large contract. So I can't fault the Bulls for giving up a bust lottery pick and a role player at best in Bobby Porter for a guy that's overpaid but is solid. The Cleveland Cavaliers get an A-. They got a lottery protected first for Nick Stauskas and Wayne Baldwin after getting them for Rodney Hood from Portland. So good going, Cleveland. The Dallas Mavericks get an A. Yes, taking a chance on Kristaps Porzingis because of his injury history is a risk, but the fact of the reality is that he's a fantastic basketball player. I think the best player from the 2015 draft when he's healthy and producing well like he was for the Knicks early last season. Although they gauged some overpaid guys like Courtney Lee and Tim Hardaway Jr., but getting Porzingis alone gives the Mavericks a great grade because they needed a star to pair up with Luka Doncic. And they've struck out on free agents for a while now. So taking a chance on a great player like Porzingis really was good due diligence by Mark Cuban, regardless of them giving up the 2 first-round picks as well. And the dumping of Harrison Barnes, I didn't really mind that much because I think Dallas wanted to clear salary after adding a lot of salary with Hardaway and Lee, so I really don't blame them for that trade. And they could give Dorian Finney-Smith more minutes. And in reality, Luka Doncic is a power forward. And that's where they played Harrison Barnes. So, and then they'll put Kristaps Porzingis at center. And then they got Justin Jackson in that Kings trade. Maybe he'll come off the bench for them. So I don't mind what Dallas did at all. The Denver Nuggets got a C. They didn't get a shooter, but they still have the buyout market to get some people. So, just a C. The Detroit Pistons got a B+. I think getting Savai Mihailuk and a second-round pick for Reggie Bullock was fantastic. And Thon Maker, I think, will see some more playing time coming off the bench for them. They're in play for one of those buyout guys. Maybe they're going for the 8 seed. Maybe they see, Indiana's going to struggle without Oladipo. I'm sure a lot of those lower tier East teams should have been thinking that. Maybe Detroit's thinking that more than Brooklyn or Charlotte, even though Charlotte tried for Gasol, and even Miami, who I'll eventually get to. But good going by the Pistons. I think they did a nice job, even though they sold off a piece and they expect to be buyers of the buyout market, which isn't that bad. The Warriors get a B because they didn't have to do much, but they could still get a shooter in the buyout market. The Houston Rockets get a C. Why the heck did you give up a lottery protected pick for Iman Shumpert? Why? Shumpert is not that great of a player. I mean, I get it, you had to dump Brandon Knight's contract, but I think that's a lot of protected first, although it'll be in the 20s, for sure. Houston, I'm sure, is going to get a buyout guy, but I think they had better options out there. Indiana gets a B. They are going to sign Wesley Matthews away from the New York Knicks after he's bought out. He'll be a nice addition. Maybe he'll start for them in place of Oladipo, or he'll come off the bench. He's better off coming off the bench, and that's why I think Indiana could have done more. I thought they should have gotten somebody that's pretty good. Wes Matthews, to me, is more average than pretty good. That would have been an interesting Markelle Fultz team, but I don't think Indiana wanted to go in that route. And I think they know that their fate without Oladipo. And then they got the 2 guards that Houston got from Cleveland initially with Wade Baldwin and Nick Stauskas. Maybe those guys will help him. Stauskas could shoot threes. And it's going to be interesting to see how this team ends up faring out. It was such a good start, and then Oladipo gets hurt. So Indiana had tough circumstances, so I gave them a B. My only A+ goes to the Los Angeles Clippers. Landed what I think might be the best asset since those Brooklyn picks that the Celtics own after that disastrous Brooklyn trade, which is the 2021 unprotected Miami pick. Who knows where Miami's going to be in 2021? Maybe that's a rebuild by then. Maybe Pat Riley's gone by then. They got that pick. Like, that's incredible. Landry Shamit's a nice player. And then today, they land Ivica Zubac and another asset in Michael Beasley, who is going to get cut, for Mike Muscala, who they got in the Harris deal. But getting Zubac and Shamit, 2 young pieces to go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they get that unprotected Miami pick. That is a huge win for the Clippers. And credit to Jerry West in that front office. That was outstanding. The Lakers got a C+. It's okay if they didn't get Anthony Davis because they had to give up literally half their roster. It would have been similar to what the Knicks did with Carmelo Anthony in 2011. Reggie Bullock could shoot, and so could Mike Muscala. Those 2 will be nice bench pieces for the Lakers. Maybe in the right situation, one of them plays in crunch time. More likely Muscala than Bullock. Because if I'm the Lakers in crunch time, I'd go Lonzo Ball, Lance Stevenson, LeBron, Kuzma, and either Ingram or even Muscala. Like, they have options. I kind of sneaky like the lineup of Muscala at center, LeBron at the 4, Ingram at the 2, with Rondo at point guard and Kuzma at the 3, and you set Lonzo Ball. Like, that would be a pretty good crunch time 5 for the Lakers as well. The Lakers gave themselves some options with these deals, and it's okay to give up Davis. Their grade would have been higher if they didn't give up on Zubac, because I think Zubac could be a very good starting center in this league. Although they have Moritz Wagner, who they're high on too. We'll see what happens with Wagner. But I wouldn't have given up on Zubac at all. I would have given up McGee in that deal personally. And then the Clippers probably would have released both McGee and Beasley. The Memphis Grizzlies get a D. Marc Gasol is worth way more than what they got. And plus Mike Conley, he could have fetched you something. Yeah, they could trade him at the draft, but you can make a case that his value won't be any higher than this. And Gasol is worth more than he got. Like, come on, Memphis. Yeah, you're going to build around Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a nice building block, could be a franchise player down the road, but come on. That was awful. And they should have gotten more. If I were Memphis, I would have asked Toronto for O.J. Anunoby. If they got O.J. Anunoby in that deal, I would have give Memphis a B for their trade deadline rather than a D. I have another D to give out, except it's the D+, and that's the Miami Heat. They did nothing to improve their roster. They're another team that should be taking advantage of the Oladipo injury in the East, like Brooklyn should have. And another team that pretty much did was Detroit, even though they gave up a piece in Reggie Bullock. And Charlotte wanted to, but they didn't pull the trigger for Gasol for some weird reason. And Miami, like I said, did nothing to improve. They get Ryan Anderson's owner's contract, which doesn't come off, I believe, for another couple years. Like, I'm surprised Miami didn't salary dump some of their guys like the Knicks did with Hardaway and Courtney Lee, and what the Clippers pretty much did as well. Open up their max cap space. So, very disappointed in Pat Riley and the Miami Heat. So they get a D+. And they don't get much for Ellington and Johnson. Only gets the Ryan Anderson contract. I would have shopped out, see what you could have gotten for Josh Richardson, who I think they look at as a building block, but the guy they should be building around is Justice Winslow. And I would have tried to salary dump Hassan Whiteside or Goran Dragic or even Dion Waiters to try to open up cap room to get in the derby for the big-time free agents. The Milwaukee Bucks get a B+. Nikola Mirotic is a very good player, but like I said, I don't understand the fit, and I made that argument before. So they get a B+. They get a good player, but I don't think it's the right fit. The Timberwolves get a C-. Could have gotten stuff for their veterans. I mean, I get why they held on to guys like Covington and Saric. I believe Saric is expiring, if I'm not mistaken, and Covington's on one of the best contracts in the league. They could have gotten something for those guys. And then Gibson is somebody that I think could have helped a contender. So they get a C-. The New Orleans Pelicans get a C. Good job on keeping Anthony Davis. So that's what makes you not get an F per se. Because I was hoping they'd wait on Davis because there's going to be more teams in the Derby in the summer. Like Boston and New York. New York could have the number 1 pick in the draft. Boston could flat out Jason Tatum. And then the Clippers have all those assets now. If they want to get him, and that Laker offer will still be there. So I think the Pelicans did the right thing. And then why the C? Why isn't it higher? They didn't get a lot for Mirotic, and I think that they could have gotten something for Drew Holiday. The New York Knicks get a C-. I think they rushed the Porzingis thing. Although they really didn't rush it. I meant that they could have waited until today to find a better deal. I think they could have gotten a better deal. They could have gotten similar expirings back, like Zach Randolph and whomever from the Kings, and could have gotten Bagley in the deal as the young asset coming back rather than Dennis Smith Jr. Not that Dennis Smith Jr. is bad. I think he could be a good player someday in the league, but I think Bagley would have been a better get for New York rather than Dennis Smith Jr. But what prevents them from getting an F is that they shedded 2 owners' contracts in Courtney Lee and Tim Hardaway Jr. And guess what? That grade goes to an A if they are able to land Kevin Durant this summer. This is Kevin Durant or bust for the Knicks. I've been saying that since October. And I'll get to Kevin Durant in a minute. I said that I'd get to him at some point because he had a bit of a falling out with the media last night in the Bay Area. But the Knicks want Kevin Durant. And if they don't get him, I think it'd be just a devastation for Knicks fans and a huge failure by the front office. But In theory, say if they don't get him and instead they get Kawhi Leonard and Kyrie Irving, that's not a bad consolation prize, but this was solely for Durant, by my all accounts. If Durant comes, that immediately becomes an A+. And if it turns into, say, Kawhi, maybe an A-, but this is Durant or bust, as I keep saying over and over and over. And the other thing with New York is that they could have gotten something for Noah Vonleh. They could have gotten something for DeAndre Jordan if they wanted to shop him, but he's a big expiring contract. And I think New York was right to waive both Wes Matthews and Enes Kanter because those are both expiring deals, and both of those guys will help contenders in Indiana and Boston, respectively. Oklahoma City gets a C-. I think they should have gotten a stretch 4. Maybe they go out and sign Markieff Morris, who I think is getting bought out by New Orleans. That would be an excellent fit for them, but I think they should have gotten a stretch 4. The Orlando Magic get a C+. I really think the Fultz move was bold by them. They gave up a lot. But I don't think it's a bad gamble. So why not give them a C+? And meanwhile, they could have checked out what was out there for Vucevic. Maybe somebody would have overpaid for him or whatnot. The 76ers get a B+. The only reason why it's not an A is because they shouldn't have given up that 2021 pick. That is the best asset, future asset, in the NBA right now. But they pick up some very good players with Tobias Harris. Don't sleep on Mike Scott. That guy can shoot threes as a wing guy. And then Jonathan Simmons, we'll see if he is the Spurs Jonathan Simmons rather than the Magic Jonathan Simmons. If they get the Spurs Jonathan Simmons, I think they're in a good spot. And then they get a lot more back to Fultz than I would have thought. So, B+ for Philly. The Phoenix Suns get a B-. Not a bad risk trying on Tyler Johnson. I think they should have tried the Flip Ellington rather than trying to buy him out. And good job by them getting off of the bad Ryan Anderson contract. The Portland Trailblazers get a B+. Rodney Hood will help them. They did not give up much for him. So, good job by them. And the Kings get a B-. They get a great pickup of the Harrison Barnes. Risky to trade Scala for Caleb Swanigan. It's risky for both ends. And coincidentally, Portland and Sacramento are next to each other on ABC order in terms of NBA teams by city. So, how ironic for me to mention the trade while talking about both of these teams. Both of these players have been disappointments in the NBA, and we'll see if a change of scenery can help both of those guys. I think both of those guys will come off the bench for their respective teams. Zach Collins obviously beating out Swanigan in Portland. And in the BCA's case, Harry Giles, Marvin Bagley beating out the BCA. So, very risky trade for both ends. We'll see who comes out of that one. Although, it's interesting, to say the least. The Spurs get a C+. They should have gotten a wing bench player. Maybe they'll sign Wayne Ellington or Wesley Johnson if he gets bought out. So, we'll see there. The Toronto Raptors get an A. Great getting Marc Gasol. It is an upgrade over Jonas Valanciunas. And they didn't give up a lot either. That is well done by Masai Ujiri. And I think they're the favorites to come out of the East now with Gasol and Leonard. And they didn't trade Kyle Lowry. I think that would have been a mistake to trade him for Mike Conley because I think Lowry's better than Conley. And say Lowry, Gasol, Kawhi, Siakam, and Danny Green in crunch time. That is outstanding. And I'm surprised that Serge Ibaka wasn't moved. Maybe Ibaka likes coming off the bench and feasting on second units. The Utah Jazz got a B-. They already made their move with Kyle Korver earlier in the year. But they could have gotten a backup big. Maybe they will off the buyout market. You never know who could become available. Maybe Dedmon gets bought out of Atlanta and they could use him as a backup big. And I don't think they wanted to go near Enes Kanter, who was originally their property. And the Wizards get a D. They gave up Otto Porter for two guys who haven't done much in the NBA, and Jabari Parker and Bobby Portis. And the other reason why they get a D is that they didn't trade Trevor Ariza in a contract year. Ariza would have been a high commodity. I think Houston and the Lakers could have given up something for him, or even Oklahoma City for that matter. Or Utah as a wing to come off their bench. But that was just bad by Washington. 2 expirings for Porter. And Porter's under contract for another couple years. Like, what free agent wants to go to Washington? John Wall banged up and is going to be out for another year. If I'm them, I rebuild. You trade Bradley Beal, but they're smart not to deal Beal right now because there's going to be more suitors in the summer. Because what if the Knicks don't get the number 1 pick and Boston gets Anthony Davis? Bradley Beal will be a good consolation prize for the Knicks. And let's say the Lakers go get Davis. He could be a good consolation prize for the Lakers as well. So good job by the Wizards by not giving up Beal. That's what prevents them from an F. But getting 2 guys that aren't very good for Otto Porter Jr. is bad GMing by Ernie Grunfeld. Now my best bet of the day brought to you by DraftKings. Not a big wager, only 78 cents. Northern Kentucky, Hofstra, Presbyterian, Austin Peay, Murray State, Arizona State, Montana, Gonzaga, Grand Canyon, Cal Baptist, the Raptors, and the Thunder. Plus 128 to win $1.78. That's it for the podcast today. Tomorrow's going to be a big one. I'm going to do my latest NFL mock draft. I believe it'll be my 5th. I'll do my bracket projections as Saturday the NCAA committee will reveal their mock 16. I'll do my mock 68 and see who makes it in that. And I'll talk about more NBA news if anything leaks and whatnot, and any other news that happens in the world of sports. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.